Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. Since 2022 is almost over, I have 5 books that I think you should read before the year is up. These are going to be different genres plus a novella in case you wanted to read something a little bit short. So I have a dark romance, contemporary, fantasy, a historical romance, plus a novella. They are some of my favorites that I've read so far this year, so if you're looking for those last minute books to read before the year is up, these are going to be perfect. I did try to stick to standalones, but technically one of these books is actually a duet, so it's more like 6 books to read, but whatever. But let's get into it. Here are 5 romances that I think you should read before 2022 ends. Starting off with the dark romance on this list, this is the one that's a duet. I'm recommending the Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton. There are 2 books. Book 1 is Haunting Adeline and book 2 is Hunting Adeline. These were the first books that I ever read from H.D. Carlton, and it made me fall in love with her writing. This duet is so good and so addicting, but I do have to warn you, it is a seriously dark series. There's dubious consent, stalking, rape, torture, all sorts of violence in these books. And book 2 especially gets even darker than the first book, so just be warned. But hey, if that's your jam, if you love reading dark romances, if you haven't read these already, do it. So this duet is about Adeline, who is an author, and she's just moved in to her grandmother's haunted estate. Our hero Zaid is this powerful figure in the underground world. He actually runs this company that saves women in sex trafficking. So these two are doing their thing, right? But when Zaid sees Adeline at her book signing, it's pretty much lust at first sight. He claims her as his right from the very beginning, and he starts stalking her and scaring her. It's a wild and dark dynamic, but it totally worked for them, and I mean, it worked for me too. I loved Zaid so much. He is the psycho stalker hero that you can't help but love just because of how obsessed he is with the heroine. The romance is addicting and it's very, very hot and kinky. So Zaid was perfect, and I also did love Adeline and how tough and hilarious she was. Like, she definitely was able to stand up to how crazy Zaid was. So these two are great together, though I will say these books are thick, like 650 pages thick. That being said, I had a ton of fun reading these books. Like, this duet was just a wild ride. I mean, I mostly love it because of Zaid and his obsession with Adeline, but the story was great. I loved all the characters, and we are getting like a spin-off of this duet that I cannot wait for. For my historical romance recommendation, I have to choose the romance that we read for the latest round in the historical romance readathon that I co-host with my friends Jessica from Peace Love Books and Lisa from My Market Bleed Lisa. We read Yours Until Dawn by Teresa Medeiros, and it was amazing. So much better than the last book that we chose, thank God. And it was also my first time reading Teresa Medeiros, and I really fell in love with this book. It was fantastic, so romantic, so swoony. This book is going to be the only non-2022 release for this video just because it's one of my favorite historical romances that I've read this year. So I have to recommend this one even though it's not a new release like the other books on this list. So this is a historical romance between Gabriel and Samantha. These two were amazing together. They were so full of fire, so much good banter between them. Gabriel is the firstborn son of a lord, and years ago he fell in love with this woman, and to prove to her that he wasn't spoiled, even though he grew up in privilege, that he knew what it meant to be a man, he signed himself up for the military, and unfortunately he came back from war a blind man. He lost his sight, which forced him to return back home, and he ended up also losing the woman that he loved. He's now become this reclusive, beastly hero, and yes, there is some Beauty and the Beast vibes to this book. Samantha, the heroine, has just signed up to be Gabriel's new nurse because all the other previous nurses have quit because of how awful and beastly Gabriel is, but she's stubborn enough not to give up on Gabriel and not to give in to his rudeness, and she actually does everything she can to make his life better. She helps him be able to live with his blindness, and this is how these two slowly fall for each other, and it is so sweet and so romantic. And then there's a little twist towards the end that you may or may not be able to predict, but I loved how it played out. I just loved how the hero was completely head over heels in love with the heroine. It was just the perfect swoony historical romance, and if you love like Beauty and the Beast retellings in your historicals, you need to read this one. For my contemporary romance recommendation, I have to choose King of Wrath by Anna Huang. This is her newest release and the first book in her new series, and it was so good. I loved it. It's probably my new favorite Anna Huang book now. It beat Twisted Hate for me by just a tiny bit. So it's book 1 in the Kings of Sin series, and the whole series is going to be about these 7 deadly sins. It's got the arranged marriage, arranged engagement trope, and it's a good enemies to lovers romance, and it was all so well done together. The main characters, Dante and Vivian, hate each other. You might have met them if you read Twisted Lies, but these two have been forced into this engagement that neither of them wants. Dante is forced because he's being blackmailed by Vivian's father, and Vivian doesn't want to do this, but she does out of duty to her parents. Vivian has to move into Dante's house so they can play off the whole engagement to make sure that everyone believes in their engagement. So there's some good first proximity as they have to pretend to be all lovey-dovey, but every scene that they have together is just like sparks flying. They constantly go head to head. There's so much good banter, and because they're forced to be together all the time, this is when they slowly start to understand each other more and fall for each other. And the way this went from enemies to lovers was so much fun to read. I feel like with every book that Anna Huang comes out with, she improves on her writing, and this one was definitely her best one yet, and it was perfectly paced too. There is some angst in this one, which I loved because Vivian doesn't know that Dante is being blackmailed by her father, and then there's some groveling at the end, which will automatically make a book like 10 times better for me. Dante was the perfect jealous and possessive hero, and he had some good groveling to do at the end. If you're a fan of the Twisted series, you definitely need to read this new series. It's got some similar vibes. I mean, if you've loved any of the heroes in the Twisted series, you'll love Dante. He's another obsessive and possessive hero, but the story here was just better in a lot of ways too. So this is my new favorite from Anna Huang. It's gonna be a long series though, because there are 7 deadly sins, so 7 books total, but I cannot wait. For my fantasy romance recommendation, I'm picking River of Shadows by Karina Halle. This is my pretty special edition. Look at all this gorgeous foiling, but this is basically what the original cover looks like, except the original is blue and not this red. I was pleasantly surprised by River of Shadows. I listened to the audiobook and I highly recommend going that route because Jo Raylan is one of my all-time favorite narrators. She's probably my top favorite female narrator just because I love her voice so much, and she does such a hot male voice too. But yes, I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this book. I think it's Karina Halle's first fantasy romance. She's written paranormal stuff, horror, but never like a true urban fantasy romance. The book is based off of Finnish mythology where the hero is literally the god of death, and the romance does give off some Beauty and the Beast vibes, so another Beauty and the Beast sort of retelling on this list. Clearly I love this retelling, but it also does have a little of Hades and Persephone as well, so a lot of good stuff in this book. The heroine Hannah goes to Finland for her estranged father's funeral, but things start to get a little bit fishy when her father's body goes missing. It's then that she discovers that he's actually a shaman, and he's been taken to the underworld and been held captive by the god of death. So Hannah, along with the help of one of her father's apprentices, goes to the underworld where death rules to try to save her father and take his place. So Hannah switches places with her father as death's captive, and this is when the romance finally starts. It actually doesn't start until quite a bit into the book just because death doesn't even show up until maybe a third of the way into River of Shadows, so it's very slow. But I honestly didn't mind it just because we get a lot of good world building. There are a ton of dark and creepy creatures in this world. Like there's a zombie unicorn and this tiny mermaid that you can fit in the palm of your hand. So the whole fantasy and mythology aspect definitely had me hooked, and the romance, I mean, it was good too. It definitely felt like a first book romance, if that makes sense. It sets the groundwork of the romance for the rest of the series. It gets mostly just physical between Hannah and Death, and they're hot together, by the way, so that was good to read, but the actual development of the romance does take its time. So it was a great first book. I'm really excited to read the rest of the series. River of Shadows though does end on a cliffhanger, just FYI. I mean, thankfully the second book is already out, but I feel like I should wait until the audiobook for that one has released just because I love Jo Raylan so much. I mean, I'm pretty sure the reason why I enjoyed this book was because of this narrator. As a side note though, if you are more interested in reading like a true standalone, I am currently reading this fantasy romance, The Dark King by Gina L. Maxwell, and I'm also loving this. This is more paranormal than fantasy. It's got fae and it's set in Las Vegas. The hero is the king of the fae of the Night Court, and he is also this billionaire who rules over Vegas. The heroine is human who goes on this little vacation in Vegas right after she gets fired, and these two meet, and somehow the next morning they wake up married together. So I'm not completely finished with this book, so I can't say it's absolutely amazing, but what I've read from it so far, I'm about halfway through. It's great, and it is a standalone, so check it out. And then my fifth and final recommendation for this video is The Close-Up by Kennedy Ryan. This is the novella. It's a standalone novella in the Hollywood Renaissance series, and it also does connect with Kennedy Ryan's Hoop series. I love this novella so much. It's not too short of a novella, but it does have enough meat to it, and it's one of those Kennedy Ryan second chance romances that isn't really a second chance romance. It's more of a second chance in a missed opportunity sort of way, where the main characters almost could have had a thing, but it was just the wrong time, and then years later they do get their second chance at love. So here we have Takira and Naz, who met during high school, their last year of high school. Naz is one of Takira's brother's basketball teammates, and they form this instant connection as soon as they meet. They have this wonderful night together, but then soon after something happens with Takira's brother, who was on his way to the NBA, and unfortunately he loses that chance, and Naz takes that chance instead. So Naz goes on to be this famous NBA basketball player. Takira is now this stylist. She was the best friend from Real, and they reunite over a decade later. Kennedy Ryan always loves to make her characters reunite after such a long time, but they reunite on a cruise for their mutual friend's birthday party. And basically, even though it's been a decade, that connection between them is still going strong, and Naz absolutely knows that Takira is the one for him, and he's so determined to make her see that, but she is a little hesitant because of her brother. It gets emotional and angsty and very hot. This novella will definitely take you on a roller coaster of emotions, and even though I always want more because it's Kennedy Ryan and I love her writing so much, the amount that we had in this novella was pretty perfect. And again, it is hot and steamy. It's Kennedy Ryan, and she always has some hot books. I mean, these two characters are on this cruise, stuck together on this cruise with nothing else to do but fall into bed, so of course it would be a hot read. But the romance itself was fantastic, and I'm always such a fangirl for Kennedy Ryan. And that is it. Those are my 5 recommendations of romances that I think you should read before 2022 is over. We've still got like 6 or 7 weeks, so get to reading. If you have any of your own recommendations that you think I should read before the year is up, please let me know. As always, links to all the books that I mentioned will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!